Good to go. All right, so we all just got done doing the introduction of the biases. I'm going to talk about mindset and how we're going to be shifting it and why we need to shift it, and explain how our brain is wired, of why we make those assumptions. So Anna, when you brought up your example, I will talk to you about how we have that mindset of instantly making assumptions, and then how we need to be innovative and why it's so important when it comes to work or our organization to start questioning things or having curiosity. And then we're going to talk about thinking like a scientist, because scientists think a lot different than we think in leadership, and how we can bring those concepts over. And we'll go over a concept called the rethinking cycle. And then we're going to end with talking about understanding the real problem that goes into those questions that April was asking, like, how do I ask these certain questions and get more information? We're going to go over that. So I'm going to start you guys off with a quick video that's going to go over into biases. Oop. And let me make sure real quick that I shared audio with you guys, because if I don't do that, you're not going to be able to hear any of this. So let me go here real quick, and then I'm going to bring it right back up for you guys. And I appreciate your patience. Share sound. Here you go.
Unconscious biases are those impressions that exist in our unconscious mind and unknowingly inform our opinions about people. When we make judgments about people, we all have biases. We are aware of many of them, but sometimes they are completely subconscious and reflect our cultural and social experiences. No matter how unbiased we think we are, these aspects of human nature shape how we interact with people and how we make decisions. They are blind spots in our rational decision-making, and we are unaware that they exist. As one famous psychologist, Daniel Kahneman, said, "The brain is a machine for jumping to conclusions." We make judgments within seconds of meeting someone, about everything from their competence to friendliness and even honesty. If we do not counter these preconceptions, we can make mistakes that jeopardize our working relationships and hinder teamwork and creativity. We live and work in a diverse society, so we must be aware that our subconscious biases and stereotypes can affect how we think and feel about people we come into contact with.
So a real simple video, but how does that connect to learning? Like, it talks about people, right, and how we have biases, but how does that connect back to the thought process of thinking differently?
I'm not sure if I'm going to get the right response to your question, but we need to make sure we understand what our biases are so that we can recognize them when we're using them, when we have them.
Yeah. So if we think about that from that aspect of how we have assumptions with people, how could that work for how we have assumptions with learning?
Well, maybe we always think that we learn visually, so that's the only way we always learn. We learn.
Okay.
Maybe we don't try other ways.
Yeah. Could it be based on how we were raised? Were we raised in a certain type of family where I'm Catholic, therefore Catholic is the right religion, and anybody else that has that is wrong? So it could be simply like that. Can you guys think of another concept? Like, if I just brought up religion, can you think of another way of just learning how we were raised that we might have a certain assumption about things?
As soon as you said that, I was thinking kind of like if you see what's going on in the world, right? Whether it's now or whether there's racial injustice, if you're not learning, if you're not open-minded to a specific category, race, ethnicity, religion, that may not affect you, or it wouldn't bother you as much that people are in turmoil unless you're learning more about it or you're having these discussions and then you realize what's going on.
Yeah. So the way that we're raised is, if you guys think about our kids or even ourselves, if we've gone through the school system, people talk to us. They tell us a bunch of facts. We do a case report on it or some type of homework that talks about that concept, but we're not really taught to think for ourselves. We're talked at, and we actually don't see that shift until about college or when we enter the workforce, depending on what type of school that you went to. So we're trained that whatever someone says to us, especially if it's a teacher, a facilitator, that is fact, right? Do you guys ever remember questioning your teachers about certain concepts? Because I know I didn't. I assumed it was fact. And so we take that with us, those experiences, and then we start to apply it with our decision making. And so they say we kind of lose that innovative and that creative space. So I'm going to bring up the slides again. Let me share. I tell you guys, I am not, there we go, not doing well with Zoom today and the troubles it's been giving me. All right, so when they've done studies about innovative mindset and changing our viewpoint that our beliefs are not what we thought they were, that we have found that it drives growth. So it drives growth in the individual person or the organization. It unlocks creativity. Well, when you guys think of creativity, it's really connected to innovation because you're allowed to think outside the box. And again, when we talk about the way our school system works, we don't really have an opportunity to really think outside the box because we're taught this is the way. And then what happens is we start to see full potential. So we start to shift our perspective. And if we talk about companies that did not have an innovative mindset, I think all of you have experienced this. I think all of you are in the age group that I'm in that you remember Blockbuster as a kid or in your teens. And if you guys remember, like Blockbuster was so exciting on Fridays because they had the new releases and there was a whole wall of it. And you got all excited that you could get the new release because they always had enough copies. Well, what Blockbuster did is they had an opportunity to buy Netflix. And the reason why they turned it down is they said, well, when Netflix first started, it was just a delivery service. The disc was sent to your mailbox. That's how you'd watch it. Well, Netflix had an issue where if it was out of stock, it was out of stock. Like you couldn't get it. And so Blockbuster said, there's no way people are going to want that when they can't even get what they want in stock when we have these walls of the new releases and you can always get what you want. And so now there's only one Blockbuster left because they didn't decide to shift their perspective. When it comes to BlackBerry, if you guys have ever heard the story about BlackBerry, is they at one point had over 55% of the market when it came to cell phones. I know when I got right out of college, my first job, they let me have a BlackBerry and I thought I was the coolest with it because of the keyboard. And it turns out that when the iPhone came out, BlackBerry C-suite and the CEO said no one wants their email connected. Like they want to separate those two. They shouldn't be combined. And look what happened to BlackBerry. In 2004, they stopped using the BlackBerry the way it would be used. And at that time, they only had 1% of the market. So what a shift from BlackBerry being the number one thing that everybody wanted to the iPhone taking over because they added email and other apps that BlackBerry refused to do. And let's talk about Toys R Us. I love Toys R Us. I was so sad when that closed a few years ago. I know I heard they're coming back. I have not seen one yet for Christmas, but they said they're out and about in certain stores. But Toys R Us refused to do e-commerce. So when they started to notice that they made a bad decision about e-commerce, they went into a contract with Amazon. Amazon signed a contract with them saying that they would only sell Toys R Us toys, no one else's, when Amazon first started off. Amazon ended up violating that contract and started selling toys from everywhere else. And if you guys remember in 2004, Amazon paid $51 million to Toys R Us. That still wasn't enough though to save Toys R Us because they were behind the times when it came to e-commerce. Same thing with Kodak. And again, I always like to talk about history because history has a tendency to repeat itself. So we've got to start thinking like this too when we hear ideas that could it work, even though in the past it didn't work. And so in this case with Kodak, Kodak believed that film would never go away. So they had all these brick and mortar stores and they refused to print digital. They thought digital is not an area that we want to be a subject matter expert in. It is not our area, it's film. And look what happened to Kodak, right? Do you see any brick and mortar stores anymore? No. So they missed that opportunity to shift. Can you guys think of some other, when you think of history of other companies, do you have any others that come to mind?
Maybe department stores.
Yeah, department stores. Any other ones? I think more recently about Bed Bath and Beyond,
Oh, yeah,
and that's one that hit home. And again, I loved that place.
yeah.
Yeah. So again, like just thinking about history and how it impacts. So, when was the last time that you've actually had your mind changed because you got new information? Sure, I love that facial expression that you just made. Cheryl just raised her eyebrows like, I'm not quite sure. And that's okay if you can't think of an example. But what we're going to try to test today is, can we moving forward maybe change that?
So I'm gonna open up a little bit and go out on a limb with this one, and it's something that you don't talk about at work, but religion. So you mentioned religion earlier, right? So we are taught to believe a certain way, and that things happen for a reason, and there's a greater power, and this is why this is happening, and there's a plan, and that's great. Until something devastating happens in your life and you realize it's science. It really is not a greater power that gave my husband brain cancer and he died 8 months later. It's science. So that was a shift from a belief to knowledge, right? So it wasn't a belief that something happened to him or there was a greater power that decided that he needed to be called home. It was science, right?
Cheryl, thanks for opening up and bringing up such a personal thing. And I'm so sorry for your loss.
Thank you.
That that is a very deep example, but I think it talks about how when new facts come into play, that your beliefs or your perspective shift. And the whole point that I wanted to bring up is we can have new beliefs and we can have revised opinions. So I was raised in a household that are full of Republicans. I thought I was a Republican. And I've started to notice over the last 7 years, I have shifted that perspective. At one point, I thought maybe I'm more Democrat. And then I just realized that I don't really agree with either party, and that's okay for me to have new beliefs. And I think it's based on the experiences that we have in life that you start to shift your perspective and have a different view. So again, the whole point is that you can have revised opinions and new beliefs, and it's okay.
I have one too.
Yeah, go ahead.
This one is really big because my entire life changed. So I was born in Romania and we moved here when I was 11 years old. But in Romania, it's very they're all Orthodox, they're all white, there's no diversity, there's no gays, there's none of that. So when we moved here, very similar to you, Katie, it was like, okay, this is how we know. So I remember when I was growing up, you know, your parents start worrying if you don't get married, if you're from Europe. So around 24, 25, 26, my mom's like, come on, you know, hurry up. And I remember she would have these conversations with me where I need to get married because otherwise it's looked bad upon. But I wasn't allowed to marry whoever. I was only allowed to preferably choose a Romanian guy or a white guy. So I was told no Black people, no Mexican people, no Muslim people, nobody that's different. So it was kind of instilled in me. It wasn't made that I had that decision in my mind. It was, I was being talked to, right? So when I met my husband online, and found out he is a Muslim from Bosnia. I started dating him. He was cool. Mind you, we're both not religious, but our families are. So I'm like, how am I supposed to tell my family that I met a Muslim person when they're anti anybody that's different? So fast forward to our life, my husband, who is Muslim, has a gay sister, war refugees from Bosnia. It was everything I was told not to do. And then his family meeting my family, it opened up not only my mom's eyes, but my entire family. And I remember the day of the wedding, like us being Greek Orthodox with them being Muslim, Muslims don't eat pork. In my traditional fairy tale marriage wedding, I was like, okay, well, we have to get married in a church and we have to eat this. And my husband's like, we can't do that. Not that we care, but our families would care. And he said something like, how would your family feel if we had to get married in a mosque? And then it hit home. I had to see it from his point of view and to explain to that. So in the end, we got married in a museum, so nobody was offended and everybody was happy. But that day, my mom came back to me and she basically apologized and said, I'm really happy that you found him and their family, because everybody's just open-minded and understanding now that not everybody's the same. So I love that example because it literally changed my life.
That's a beautiful example. Again, you guys are talking about very personal things, but you're also talking about the way that you were raised and how it shifted because you found new information. And new information changed your perspective. And that's exactly what we want to do, is that it's okay over time to have things change. It's okay to pivot. Now, what happens, and we'll get into this slide in a second, is that we start to have guilt. We start to think we're no longer the subject matter expert because we're changing our opinion. And again, I'm talking about from the realms of the professional side, but those concepts still apply in your personal life as well. So if we talk about a mind shift, we need to redefine what we think the problem is when it comes to either personal or professional when we're trying to solve something. And we need to break away from traditional patterns. So that's part of how our brain is wired, is that we see patterns. That is why when you watch that video about unconscious biases, that we make opinions right away, because our brain is wired to make decisions within seconds. And it is based off previous patterns that we've seen or previous information that we've known. But when we talk about the creativity about, well, it might have not worked in the past, but it's possible it could work in this scenario, we start to open up our eyes and actually start to shift our mindset. So really, it also connects to like a growth mindset. And so what they found in studies that have been done is that when people start to question what they're doing, so in the case of forecasters, people that watch what's going on with politics and who's going to become the president. We found that people that were forecasters that changed halfway through the election, saying, no, I think there's new information and it's actually going to be this person that's going to win, that they are twice as likely to be right because they started to question their perspective. We also see it with students when they take tests. Students that actually go back through their questions where they're like, wasn't sure. I don't know if you guys did that as a kid. I did too, where I'd circle it and I'd be like, I come back if I have enough time. Well, that shows that we had that growth mindset because we were going back to re-examine what the question was and what the fact is that we have. And what they found is students that did that were more likely to be right on the test when they went back the second time because they've had time to think. And then lastly, when it comes to US presidents that have said, we're going to do this, and then they get into the presidency and they actually shift their perspective, they are actually in history talking about how they had curiosity, and curiosity changed their perspective of what they planned on doing because of new fact. So again, having that open mind. And so if we really want to take it a step further, I'm a big fan of this quote because I think it's pretty accurate. Those who cannot change their mind can't change anything. And so when I talk about my kids and I try to give them these quotes, I have a 9-year-old and an 11-year-old, and they laugh at me when I do stuff like this. I'm a big quote fan. I just can connect to it better. I'm not sure my kids are there yet, so I might have to use some new techniques. But it hits home that this isn't wrong. If I have a certain perspective, but I'm expecting my team to have a different perspective, or I'm expecting my partner, my kids to have a different perspective, shame on me, because I'm not open-minded. So why the heck would they change their perspective if I'm not willing to change mine? And so that was an eye-opener for me of, holy cow, I've got to start thinking differently. Does that resonate with anybody else? Is anybody else here a big quote person? All right, I got Anna shaking her head. I got one. All right, so let's talk about what prevents us actually from changing our mindset. And it's really about that overconfidence cycle. I've been in HR for 17 years. I fell into HR. Most people fall into HR. But how I got into HR is I'm a law enforcement major. I went to Western Illinois, one of the best schools in the country for law enforcement. And I thought I wanted to be a police officer or an FBI agent. And I had a rude awakening when I had to do my internship that I realized, nope, I got to stay close to home. So that internship ain't going to work. And I ended up working at Walgreens doing loss prevention. And lo and behold, loss prevention does employee relation investigations. And people on the call that don't know what employee relation investigations are, hostile work environment, sexual harassment, everything that you can possibly think that's yuck. That's what I did. I did those investigations. And that's how I got into HR and started building out that muscle. And so I've been in HR for 17 years. I think I'm a subject matter expert. I've been able to work in general HR and other areas. I think my strongest is employee relations. But if I am cocky and I assume I know everything, then I'm never going to keep learning about the new trends that are going on in HR. And what we've seen is COVID has brought up all kinds of new things in the last 3 years of how HR runs. So I have to keep an open mind. But when we found people that don't have an open mind is because this cycle right here. And it's we have an opinion, we think about facts to support it. And you guys can even think about this from politics, right? When we look up news, how you can find facts to support it or not support it. And then we validate it with that support. So we know we're right because I found fact on it. I found this article or this video on it. And then I have too much pride to say that I'm wrong. Have any of you guys experienced that? I've experienced it with my kids, where my 9 and 11-year-old have told me I am wrong. And I was.
That when you come out and say, because I said so.
That's right. But it's, again, being open to someone telling you, I'm not sure that is accurate. And does your team have psychological safety and trust with you that they're not going to be crucified if they do question you on this? And this is where we find really good leaders and not so great leaders because of this cycle. Because you were promoted because you're the best. We believe that you're the best, so therefore you should lead. Which we found in studies that's not the case. Your average performer actually is your better leader because they grow the team. We're no longer the subject matter experts when we get into leadership. The people that are under are. And we hire people that are smarter than us and brighter than us because that's what their role is. And some leaders don't see it that way. They assume the moment that they move into this role, they have to be better. We have to be smarter. And we always know what's right. Have you guys seen leaders like that?
Mhm.
And how has your experiences been with those leaders?
Not good.
Not good, right? Because they're closed-minded.
Yeah.
They don't want to hear any new ideas. So that's why we don't want to have that mindset. So what happens is, and
Back there,
again,
Katie,
yeah, go
sorry,
ahead.
to that slide.
Yeah.
I was thinking the previous slide you're on.
Mhm.
Where I struggle sometimes here is, I can have opinion and I can find facts to support my opinion. And then when I go to communicate my opinion, someone else can find facts that are against my
You're correct.
opinion. And so then I kind of usually back off, unless I'm very passionate about something needing to change. But I think that's where sometimes I struggle with the confidence in myself.
Yeah, imposter syndrome can come up with this. And so it really is important that you have a circle that can help through that. I have a coach and I've got a mentor. I've had a mentor throughout my life. I'd highly recommend it if there's someone that you see that's really confident and does it so gracefully, and that is something that you want to work on. And again, I'm just using an example. Ask that person if they'd be willing to have coffee with you once a month to learn that skill. And that's how I've always had my mentors. It's a skill that I haven't mastered and I want to learn from them. I know I'm never going to be a subject matter expert in it, but to have a better understanding of that skill makes me feel more confident than when I'm facing it. But what we're going to talk about in a couple more slides, April, is how we can start shifting that perspective and how you can switch it to that scientist perspective. And sometimes your teammate's going to be right. And sometimes you're going to go with, well, what you thought was the right decision, and that's okay. But the more information that we get, the more it can either shift us in the direction that we're going to go this way or that way. And that's the whole point we want. So I assume if your teammate's bringing it up to you, they had some other facts and it made you get curious to question your decision making of, I'm not sure I want to do that or not. Or do you close down? And that's a rhetorical, that's a question for you, April. Are you finding that you're mostly shutting down when that happens?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, I am.
Okay, so
Yeah.
we're gonna get back to that, and then I'm gonna go over this scientist slide, and then I want you to tell me if you think that you could try these tactics, and could that change your perspective versus shutting down?
Yep.
So what happens is we start to stop learning when we have seen those leaders that you guys just talked about that hasn't been a good experience, they usually fall into these 3 buckets. I'll give you the example. I am one of those people. I'm like an influencer with my friends, is what I say. If I love a product, I tell them about the product and how they have to have the product because it's the most amazing product in the world. And so what I do is I preach to them how amazing it is and why they need to have this because it's going to change their lives. And then I've seen people that prosecute, right? And prosecute means I make you feel guilty for you having a different perspective, and it's not the right perspective. And we see this a lot in HR. What's going on right now with the politics is that there's a lot of hate going on, and there's a lot of prosecuting. If you're not Republican, you're against me. If you're not Democrat, you're against me. And that's when we see people pushing their perspective on people and making them feel bad to have a different form of thought. And then when we talk about from a political standpoint, we are wired to be liked. That's probably the crappiest part about being in leadership is that we're not always liked with some of the decisions that we make, but we're the ones that are delivering it and have to support it. And so from a political standpoint, it's I want to be liked by everybody. So I will be more like a politician to make sure everybody in the room really likes me and what I'm doing. And so usually in these 3 buckets is when we have issues because you stop rethinking and you're just assuming you are always right. It's your perspective. Your perspective is the right perspective. So I'm going to talk about the curse of knowledge in this quick video.
The curse of knowledge can limit our creativity. How can it limit our creativity? You're not going to try new things because you think you know. Who said that? You think you know. It's not going to work. Tried it before. Never going to happen. We don't allow ourselves to try things because we just assume that we know best. But it limits our ability to think outside the box, and it limits our ability to truly have an opportunity mindset.
Does that resonate with anybody? I know I've told people that that's not going to work. I've done it before with my team. So why would we even attempt that? Does anybody have some scenarios where they've done that?
We do. On the best and brightest team, we had a lot of new hires recently since the pandemic. And obviously I've been with the company for 10 years, so I know the leadership team and I have been here for a while, so we know what we've tried and we haven't tried. But a lot of the younger generation coming in, they have these really cool ideas, but sometimes it's the same things that we wanted to try in the past and it didn't work. And some people on our team are instantly like, nope, we tried it. And a lot of the times, yes, we tried it, but it was different times. We didn't have AI, we didn't have the technology. So what if it works now? It does. This comes up a lot in today's world.
Anybody else?
We do the same. So as I mentioned, I've been here for 33 years and, we'll try something and, oh, that doesn't work. Let's shift and we're going to go in a different direction. And then, with turnover the way that it is, like 10% a year, I'm in a very small class of people who have been here to see through all of these changes. And so, now we're going to go back and let's try that. And you think, well, we did that 15 years ago. And here's the reasons why it didn't work. And what I always feel is the truth lies somewhere in between, right? And it might not be always to one side or to the other, but maybe there's a better way to do it so that everyone can kind of like meet in the middle. So balance those scales out. So we're doing this through like workflows and procedures, and there's one school of thought that says, hey, I as an insurance agent should be able to do everything myself. And then the other side is I can only do certain things. I need support staff to do the rest. And this is the thing that we ping pong back and forth over the years. And I do feel that they're probably, is a balance in between, but it's finding that balance. But what I find is it's not one person's opinion of it. It's not my opinion to say, hey, listen, we tried that, 5 different times over the course of 33 years. But it's finding what works now. As you mentioned, technology is not the same as it was the last time that we don't have the same people that we had here with the same skill sets that the others had. So I like to, rather than dictate what's going to happen, as you mentioned before, the people with those highest skill sets are the people that are in there doing it. They're the subject experts. And so we will hold summits to say like, okay, let's bring all your ideas to the table. We know that there's a problem. We acknowledge that there's a problem. We're working towards a solution. What works well for you, and no fear of prosecution on the fact that you're not doing it the way that the procedure is currently written, but what works better? Let's change this to make it better for everybody. And they have a buy-in at that point. They feel validated that you're listening to them and their ideas. And although you're not going to make everybody 100% happy, because you've got those people that are the outliers, it's going to be one way or it's going to be completely the opposite. But if you can get majority buy-in, it usually works better. And again, my group is over 60 people strong. I directly manage 37 of them. So sometimes it's hard to get everybody going in that same direction.
That's a great example. In my experience over the last couple of years, I've had the opportunity to be really innovative. And so the way that I've always approached it of, can I pilot it? If I pilot a small version of it and we learn lessons from it, can we expand it? Or can we shut it down if it didn't work? And so that's usually how I would get buy-in from my leaders, because I have a hypothesis. I think it is going to work. And I'll give you guys an example. I had a really great opportunity at American Family. That was my last stop before I started doing my own consulting business. And I had the diversity recruiting team, new team, never created before, but we would work with different categories of diversity and build out talent programs for that. We would find nonprofits that are across the country. So example, one of them was an organization that really worked on people that were on the spectrum. And so I had an idea of like, they want to work in a call center. I think they can work in a call center. And I had so many people that were against me because they're like, they're not good customer service. Like they're going to struggle. They're going to need another piece of software or technology. Can we even afford that? And so what I found is an organization called Ability Go. They're out of New Jersey and they upskill. They focus on call centers and putting people that are on the spectrum. And they have coaches that are virtually available to help coach them when they're getting onboarded. And I said, hey, we have 6 call centers. Let me use one call center. Let me have a couple cohorts and let me go from there. And what we found is the people that were part of this group ran circles around the group that did not have the disability. And what we found is they were more reliable, they were more open-minded, and the cost of what it was to even bring them on was cheaper than what it would cost to bring an external. And the reason for that is they had to work part-time for us so they could still receive government benefits for their medication, to see their doctor, whatever support that they needed. So that was one of the pieces that we had to figure out. Well, at American Family, we don't hire part-timers. Like, why would we do that? And so when I was able to show them the cost and how it was actually worth it, and if we pilot it, then we can go from there. Well, we ended up doing it through all 6 call centers. And now the place where we had the most call offs, nights and weekends, we were able to fill. And we made this group of people feel like they were welcomed in corporate America, a place that they never thought they could work. And so that's where I'm saying, like, we have to shift our perspective. And just because we have a hypothesis of this might not work, or it could. And if it doesn't work, what lessons did we learn and how do we apply it in the future? And that's just a small example of how we have to change our mindset or our biases that we have based off knowledge that we've always been told. So yeah, just a different perspective. But what happens is we have a tendency to think we're always right as we move up the chain. And it's harder for us to think outside of that perspective. So I'm going to share the screen again, and I'm going to show you, and this is April, what I was talking about, how we can shift our mindset. So if we talk about those 3 different buckets that I told you guys, from the preacher, from the prosecutor side, from the politician, and if we shift our perspective of how we can think about it from a scientist mode, instead of seeing a moral weakness, we're seeing it as intellectual integrity, meaning that I got new information, I'm shifting it. Because of this new information, I want to make sure that we handle this appropriately. So based on that, we are going to shift. Instead of seeing it that you're wrong and admitting defeat, We're one step closer to having better information that's more valid than what we had previously that would have set us up for failure. Instead of that flipping flop response where people might think that we just keep changing our opinion based on the wind, we can say actually it's because we have more fact, more logic, more data to support what we're trying to do when it comes to this project or this initiative. And so that's a different mindset. It kind of gets rid of the guilt that we feel thinking that we're wrong as the leader. Can you guys relate to this at all or see the difference?
Yep, I see the difference.
Do you think that there's one that you would struggle with out of these three?
The one that I don't struggle with is the prosecutor mode. I say I'm wrong probably every week. But I do better work on the other ones.
It becomes easier too, I think, once you admit that you're wrong and nothing bad happens. I think we're always waiting for the other shoe to drop when we screw something up or we made a mistake. Or you get that phone call, your boss wants to talk to you. What's your first reaction?
Anxiety.
Anxiety, because why?
What did I do wrong?
Exactly, but that's how we're wired. So we're wired, instead of like a phone call saying, awesome job with your team and what you guys did, our first reaction is to think it's something negative, right? We did something wrong. So when we think about it from these aspects of these three buckets, we're changing the perspective that it's not wrong. We're getting more information, and more information is pivoting our decision making. And that's why I really like pivoting. I really think of Friends. Did everybody watch Friends?
Mhm.
Okay, you think of that orange couch
Yep.
where they're yelling pivot. I feel like that's what COVID was for us as leaders. We kept pivoting off based off new information that coming through, and everybody was open to it because it was a pivot. And so I think we take that concept and we apply it in our everyday lives, that it's okay to pivot, and we're explaining the why. When we talk about bad change management happens because we don't explain the why. Have you guys ever seen that? Where a change happens, you don't understand the why, but you have to deliver that message. Yeah. Isn't it hard to explain a message that you don't understand the why to?
Or don't believe.
Or don't believe, but yet you have to stand behind it? So knowing that stuff and the roles that you're in, how do you take those as lessons of, I got to make sure every time I talk to my team, I need to explain the why. I need to make sure I'm taking them on the journey with me. If I end up pivoting something, I need to explain why I pivoted. Because otherwise, they're going to think there's something wrong. Like, you're always pivoting things. Why? Well, it's because we got new information, and new information is pivoting how we think the outcome of this project should be or this initiative. So take them along on that journey. Other thoughts with people that might have difficulty with these three buckets? Okay. All right. So this is actually what started this whole idea of me making this training for Best and Brightest. I saw this quote and it kind of just hit home to me that Albert Einstein said this, or they say Albert Einstein said this. If you only had 1 hour to save the world, I'd spend 55 minutes defining the problem and only 5 minutes finding the solution. That was fascinating. The reason why it's fascinating is that he's saying that we're solving the wrong problems when it actually comes to work or anything. Like, are we truly at the right problem? And how do we start to figure out if we are or if we aren't? And so I'm going to give you some examples of some questions we can ask when we're in meetings or if we're about to kick off a project. So this is the think like the scientist perspective, but thinking about it from these steps. And the other piece I want to let you guys know is I will send you the PDF of all the slides so that you can reference back to this so you don't have to be randomly writing all this down. So the thing we want to talk about if we're in a meeting with our team or whoever we're working with, should we even be discussing this? And the way to do that is, do we understand what the true root of the problem is? Are we making assumptions without fact to back it up? What evidence do we have to support it? What's the cause and effect? sometimes we get that actually messed up of what the cause and the effect is. And then what's the implications if we go one way or the other way? And what does the roadmap look like if we do it? Because I feel like strategy is great. That's the long-term plan. But when we think about the roadmap, that's kind of showing the short term of what milestones we're going to have along the way. And if COVID taught us anything, you're going to be pivoting. So our roadmap might look a little bit different. So it's okay as you're in the meeting to look at these questions. It could be that you guys write it down. It could be that if you have OneNote open because it's a virtual meeting that you can look at these and you can use that as a way to start the discussions about, are we truly at the root of the problem? Because what we have found is it's not. Now, what's been fascinating for me being in HR for 17 years is I've never been in a consultant role. I've always been in the leadership roles, but I've never been in a consultant role. And it was definitely a mind shift that I've worked with many companies this year. That the cool part is I didn't have to make the decision. I got to come in there and I got to be like, here's option one, here's the pros and cons. Here's option two, the pros and cons. And here's option three. Which one do you want? And that was a different mindset for me. I've never actually applied that. So what I would throw out to you guys when you're sitting in that seat as that leader, think about it more from a consultant, from an outside perspective. Because again, we have tunnel vision as we've been at organizations for a really long time that we haven't really challenged ourselves sometimes. And so we have our own biases that cause this. What's your thoughts about this process?
I like it.
How do you actually put it back on the team though? Because in my experience, in the meetings, even if I say this is what I think, or here's the options, they want me to say the final word and they don't want to be wrong.
Yeah, we have to start to make it it's okay that if it is wrong. I think that's the piece. There's such fear. Again, we talked about if your boss calls you, automatically assume it's because you're about to get some bad news. You did something wrong, versus us saying that it's okay if it is wrong and what lessons did we apply. But that's a different mindset because the way that we were raised, I'm Eastern European, my mom's Ukrainian, my dad's Croatian, so I know Anna could relate to this. They are always right, I am always wrong. Okay. And so that's a different perspective when I got into the real world and started to realize that's not the case. And I had to start shifting my mindset. And so you have to let it know it's okay if we try something. And that's why I say put yourself in the consultant role, because you can ask, what's our options? Where's the risks with those? What other facts would we need in order to feel more comfortable with the decision? And again, if you're guiding it from a coaching perspective, like those questions that I just asked, you're not giving them one way or the other. But here's what we've found based on studies. If you do give your opinion, most likely people are going to actually abide to it. Like say, yep, I agree with you, Anna. You're right. And you can see it when you look at that bias sheet that I gave you guys. There's one about people conforming to you. So I love it. I always tell CEOs when I'm about to do an exercise with them or facilitate, and there's a CEO in the room, not to speak as much. Let your team speak. Because the moment that they speak, everybody conforms.
Mhm.
And that's a problem because they're not learning to think for themselves. They're thinking, I don't want to get in trouble if I disagree with my CEO. So think of it exactly, you are the CEO of your team. So when you start giving opinions, 9 times out of 10, they're going to agree with you. And you might have one person in the room that's willing to stand up. So when we think about it, if you take that coaching seat or that consulting seat and just ask how and what questions, you're just gathering more facts. And I always say, I'm just trying to gather more facts because I'm not the subject matter expert. And I want to make sure we're thinking about it from different angles based on the experiences that you guys have. And it takes time to learn that skill of how to use how and what questions. So I always say practice at home. So April, this is where you're going to practice with your teenager. Now, when you ask how was their day, what's the response that we always get?
Good.
Bye.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so how can we ask a different question that we might get a different response?
What was the best part of your day?
You got it. What didn't go so well? Yeah, we can ask those types of questions. They can't give us a one-word answer. They actually have to elaborate. And what I always do with my one-to-ones with people, I'll ask 2 questions that seem to really open up the door. I'll say, what's on your mind? And you can do that with your teenager. You can do it with your partner. You can do it with your best friend. What's on your mind? What do you want to talk about? And where can I help support you?
Mhm.
And it is amazing, by opening those doors, you're bringing psychological safety, that you actually care about how I'm doing as a human being. And I might be struggling. I might bring up something personal. I might bring up something professional. But either way, you open that door, that it makes it easier for me to bring up a topic that really is on my mind. Because 9 times out of 10, people have topics on their mind. And they're just praying that you actually bring up that topic when you have the one-to-one. But we're not mind readers. So what might be a priority in my mind as a leader is not a priority for your individual contributor. So you got to keep that in mind. So if we start to apply how to think like a scientist, this is the new cycle you would see. And this is the rethink cycle. And if you guys want to do it in a safe place with your team, you could talk about, hey, I'm trying to flex this new skill where if I have doubt with something, I'm going to ask you guys follow-up questions because I want to learn more. I want to understand more. So you're going to see me ask questions, and that's because I'm curious. And I'm excited to discover some new information that you're going to reveal because I'm not into the day-to-day work, so I'm not going to know. And then what happens is the outcome is that confident humility. People love when you actually admit that you don't know everything. When they talk about people that are likable, it's the people that say, I'm not the subject matter expert. I'm just here to learn from others. People love it. It's a great first impression. Because in reality, we don't know everything. And in reality, there's a lot of new things that are coming out that we can't keep up with. So there are going to be people that are going to be subject matter experts that are going to be brighter, smarter, more innovative than we are. And that's okay. You get to develop those people. You get to coach those people. So there is an activity we're going to do. And the activity is I either want you to grab your phone, and if you have an iPhone, I want you to go to notes. If you don't have an iPhone, I don't know what the Android has as a note feature, but a place where you can write notes. And I want you to do exactly what you see on this little iPhone that I created. I know it's not the best cell phone, but this is the icon that I made. And I want you to talk about all the things you don't know and things you've recently learned. So I'll give you an example. Things I don't know. I can't speak Spanish. I am not a very good cook. I do not know math very well. I struggle with it. So those are things I don't know. I'm not good at it. But they're things that I've recently learned, and I'm going to build that list of things that I've learned. I've started to learn Ukrainian. It's been great to learn just to have basic ways of saying hello, how are you? So I can speak to my mom that hasn't been able to speak that language in a very long time. So there's things that I've recently learned that I've loved. I just read a wonderful book that made me think about my perspective and having a different viewpoint. So I can write all that stuff. So I'm going to give you about 3 to 4 minutes, and want you to write a couple things that you don't know, and you're probably not going to know because you don't want to learn about it. And then things you've recently learned. When you guys think about personal or professional, what's the new skill or new information that you've learned? Okay. All right. So if you had to name one or two things, one, the things you don't know, and one that you've recently learned, what would they be?
I go.
Yeah.
So, one thing that I don't know that I'm not very good with are digital platforms.
Okay.
Just and how the different ones that specifically that we use in the banking industry. And that's something that we're looking into right now of changing some digital platforms. So I don't know much about it, but I'm also learning about it.
All right. And how has it been with learning?
A little slow for me.
That's okay though.
Just
But
so
are
many
you
different options out there. But of course I'm not leading this project. I'm just a part of it. So asking the questions is good for me, especially that template, because we're going to be going through a lot of different demos, and it's something I want to be a part of, but like I said, it's not my area since it's going to be on the marketing and IT side.
But I love that, April, because you get to be the scientist with it and have the hypothesis about certain things, and then hear what they have to say based off the facts that they found. So that's
Yeah.
beautiful. Who wants to go next?
I will.
Okay.
All right, so things that I don't know about, very similar. So software and technology options for the team, and I feel that that's a place where we could improve so greatly, and it would save so much time for the team and give them additional focus. But I just don't even know where to start. And we have the whole IT department, and I kind of leave it up to them and to make their best judgments. Other things like balancing when managing. So as a woman, and I can say this in our nice safe space, right? So if you're too strict, then you're criticized for being too harsh. And if you're too soft, then you're criticized for being too woman-like, you're too soft. So there's a very fine balance there that we need to find. I haven't found that yet, by the way. Because I find myself like, all right, we really need to talk about this, this, and this. And then all of a sudden you get the deer in the headlight looks and like, well, it's okay. Well, you know what? It's really not okay. And then how best to motivate them to want to do their best without playing on emotions, right? So strictly like taking the emotion out of it. My new manager recently had a great saying, and he said, keep the passion, lose the emotion. And it's true, but as women, we tend to be more emotional. I have a team out of my 37, so 2 are men and the rest are women. And that's what happens. You're defeated. You come in, I have the Kleenex on my desk because like crying happens frequently, right? So it's trying to find that balance. Okay. And then what I've learned recently, well, first of all, you're never too old to learn. I recently went back to school at night. So this is a good thing that came out of COVID is a lot of online courses are now being offered. And so I have zero excuse for not finishing my degree. Being a better team player. So understanding like, you know what, it's not all one way or all the other, right? I don't have to be like so definite in my beliefs and the way I want things to go. My new boss actually is very new. He started in June, and I just thought, I don't know how this is ever going to work because I'm the boss, so I don't need a boss. But what really, it's been a great compliment to what I'm trying to do, and he supports me very well. So something that made me very fearful of, I actually really enjoy.
Great for sharing. Thanks, Cheryl. Anna?
Are we sticking to professional?
You can do whatever you want. I just at least give me one and one.
I am both.
Okay.
Great.
All right. Let's hear it.
On the personal side, I don't know how to get the street light outside fixed. It has been broken for like 4 months and I don't know who to call. I have no idea how to get that fixed. It's not my light. It's probably the city's. I don't know, but it's been bugging me. And then work-wise, I don't know how to use AI to make my work better outside of generating an email caption or just the text. I would love to use AI to create new things outside of just the text. I would love that.
All right.
But I have recently learned, oh, another one work-wise that is kind of difficult for me because I am newly in management too, is taking out emotion from decision making. Like Cheryl said, there's people that come up to you and as you know, their manager, they're asking, you know, different questions based on their life. And I've never had to work at that level. I don't know the advice to give. And then you don't want to offend at the same time, but you want to be there for them. So I struggle with that one. But on the brighter side, things that I've learned recently is to address issues that I don't agree with, but in a respectful way. You talked about, you know, when your boss gives you an idea or whatever it is, you just take it and go with it. But sometimes I don't agree with it. I'll still do it because I have to, but I will address it and say, listen, don't you think this would be better? Or why would that happen? So I've never done that before. And recently that was generated in us to start radical candor, where you basically have these conversations. So I'm doing that. It's not easy to do and speak up, but I'm working on it and I'm learning how to do it.
I love that. You guys all brought up wonderful points about emotional intelligence, and it is a struggle for women, and we deal with a lot of stuff because we are held at this. People have biases when it comes to gender. Again, Cheryl, you did a great way of summing it up. So I think it's great topics. And yes, they will make you better leaders as you learn to master. In this case, though, we're only going to focus on the growing of the mindset and how to apply it, but they all influence some of the things that you just talked about. So I'm going to share the screen and we're actually going to rock and roll through a few of these slides because we only got 15 minutes together and I want to be respectful of your time. So when we talk about how do you start applying this mindset that we're talking about, this rethinking cycle, some of the easiest ways is listening to podcasts or watching videos on YouTube of people you might not agree with, that you might not have the same viewpoint in. And what we have found is that active listening, you learn their perspective, which opens up your mind. When you have doubt, turn it into curiosity. That's when you guys do those coaching questions and ask for more information because it's helping you build a picture and understand someone else's perspective. The making a list of what you guys just did. Oh, go ahead, April.
It's just kind of ironic, or maybe not, but I listened to a podcast this morning from Simon Sinek that was literally about
Love him.
open mindset. So
Yeah.
it's really correlated with your conversation.
Absolutely. My
Perfect.
favorite one is Adam Grant. So he comes in the same realm and he has a book that talks about think again. And it connects to some of these concepts that we're talking about. And he also has a podcast. So I love that you're listening to Simon. I heart him. He is fabulous. But making a list like you guys just did, you can do this practice every quarter if you wanted to see what you're learning. Because when we talk about being leaders, you still have to grow. Like we don't stop growing. So figure out if you want to get a new hobby. And again, and that's personal. If it's professional, like going back to school, you're learning new stuff in your classroom and taking the experiences that you're having day to day and applying it to concept, which is amazing. And then hunches and hypothesis. This is where we talk about being like a scientist. It is okay for you guys to have a hunch or a hypothesis and see how it plays out. So that's like from a daily perspective, how you can apply this personally and professionally. So half the battle is learning to spot the problem with clarity. And so when we talk about clarity, it's you guys asking those questions. And what we have found is the difference between success and failure is solving the real problem. And that's kind of where we get caught up. We're in meetings all day and you're kind of questioning yourself, was that really necessary to have that meeting? Or could it just been an email? And so we're starting to see the perspectives with COVID and the impact that it's had is you actually have more meetings now than you did pre-COVID, about 3 times as many. And that is actually impacting you getting work done. And therefore you are doing work off hours because you have no time to do the downtime of your own projects because you're too busy developing the rest of your team. So we want to talk about, are we really solving the real problem when we're having these meetings, or we're about to do a project or initiative? And here is an activity I'm not going to have you guys do because we just don't have enough time, but I want you to do this activity with your team. So the question is, what's the number comes next? I would have given you like 5 to 10 minutes to solve this problem and get people to think. We actually have personality tests that make you do this, which I always question because your IQ stays the same. Your IQ stays the same from what you were in high school. Where it was there is what you are as an adult. We don't see it really shift that much. When it comes to personality tests, you are most likely staying the same with your personality profile. You might see it go uptick a little bit or down a little bit, depending on what's going on in life. But your EQ, your emotional intelligence, changes over time. And I'm bringing this up because with this activity, the answers to these questions is all it is bigger numbers. There is no pattern with this. No pattern whatsoever as you guys are trying to figure this out.
Driving
Okay?
me crazy. I'm like, nope, double,
But
nope.
there's exactly, and that's what I want your team to think,
Uh-huh.
because the last concept I want to teach you guys is we are brains that recognize patterns. So what you were doing trying to solve those problems is recognize patterns. But here's the deal. There's concealed rules everywhere. There are rules that people have in their mindset that are not actually accurate. And so when we think about we don't know the rules, we have a more open mindset. So when it comes to projects and initiatives or your team working together and functioning, all of us having different points of view actually makes us better at playing the game. It brings a different perspective. And so with that, change happens along the way. And so perhaps we create new ways to play and be innovative with each other by doing such of an activity as those three that I just gave you. And the whole point is, as you guys are about to go through things, we have to remove those rules that have been in our head because that's what we've always seen and that's what we've always recognized. So I like to bring up concealed rules. And you guys can Google concealed rules and you can see some other activities that are out there with that. But it's something to think about as you want to build a high performing team. And so when we asked about those powerful questions that April was asking, like what questions can I ask? I actually built out a list of them. And this is why I'm going to give you the PDF so you can have it. These are open-ended questions that are coaching. And then you can actually probe a little bit deeper on the right-hand side of questions you can ask. And again, you guys can shift it based on who you're talking to. If it's your husband, your partner, your child, a friend, but you'll be amazed by when you ask these questions, what doors open and how you build psychological safety and trust, and you start to understand the other person's perspective. And so there's a quick video I'm going to show you about Nita, and she's a leader, and what should she do based off what we know with what she's dealing with.
Nita is leading a crucial new oncology project with a small team in London. The team, which also includes Carlos, Louise, and Padma, has weekly update meetings about the project. Nita expects her team members to speak up with any questions they may have and also notify her and the team of any problems or delays they've encountered. Nita sometimes gets frustrated with some of her team members' behavior during these meetings. Take Carlos, for example. He is a key scientist, but he won't speak much at the meetings. She knows he's got good ideas because he stops by her office every now and then to run them by her. Nita is beginning to wonder if she made a mistake hiring him. His background is impressive, and he came off so well during the interviews, in spite of his having earned his PhD at a little-known university in his home country. Maybe she should have followed her gut and only looked at the top schools. Padma is brilliant, and she has no problem speaking up. But it always seems like she gives a 10-minute speech with background information before she gets to the point. Nita would like to give Padma, who is on assignment from New Delhi, more responsibility. But her tendency to waste precious time by being so long-winded is causing Nita to lose confidence in her ability to lead. Louise is the only team member Nita is not concerned about. She finds ways to break into the conversation with relevant information and suggestions, and she's always concise and to the point. It seems like Louise is always coming up with the best ideas on the team, which doesn't surprise Nita, as Louise attended one of the top medical schools in the UK. Nita believes Louise has what it takes to be a leader.
What's your thoughts about that?
Nita is
Interesting. I could
It's like Nina is very biased.
Nita is, but I'm pretty sure every day that we make decisions, we're all biased.
I was relating with some people on my team.
And that's the whole point, is just elevating of that we do have biases based on prestigious schools. Based on the scientist doesn't speak up enough in there, but he might be introvert. So how do we start thinking about our team from those dynamics? And so, Cheryl, I'm going to answer your one question that you had at the beginning because it's not going to be in this presentation, but it does talk about the aspect of our teams and how we manage them. Whenever I have a new member start on my team, I like to ask them, how do they learn? How do they like to be appreciated? And what are they trying to do in their career? Is it a certain skill? And what I found is 9 times out of 10, no one learns the way I do. No one likes to be appreciated the way I do. I'm fine in a public setting. I've noticed that some people that are introverts like a handwritten card. I've noticed that I'm a hands-on learner. I've seen other people that are not that way. And when I've thought of a skill that someone mentions that they want to learn, it turns out I am not the subject matter expert. So I have to actually introduce them to someone that can actually do that skill. And based on those pieces, if you do it on the front end, it's amazing how you can see them excel because their onboarding is a way smoother because we've learned some pieces about where they're at in life. Now, what we have found is when things happen personally or professionally, I might shift a little on how I learn or how I like to be appreciated because new information has come into play. But I wanted to make sure I answered that for you.
Thank you.
So we've already talked about overconfidence and rethinking, but I wanted to put them next to each other just so you can see. So when we talk about the left-hand side, what we're doing is we're sticking with our old ways. We're not seeing that there's opportunity to change, and we're refusing to learn a different way. When it comes to the right-hand side, it's that growth mindset. We understand that there's flexibility and things pivot, and we're actually finding joy learning and having that curiosity. And again, you'll start to see the spark when you start doing the coaching questions and the asking of it to let your team know that it is safe for them to speak up and give more detail for you so that you have a better understanding of what they are a subject matter expert on or what the project is that you're discussing. And so I told you guys I heart Adam Grant. He has a book called Think Again. And a lot of the concepts that we're talking come from those leaders like Adam Grant in the industry talking about these things. And so he just says in a turbulent world, there's another set of cognitive skills that might matter more. The ability to rethink and unlearn. And so if we think about setting up success for our kids, our partner, our friends, it could be just having conversations about how do they rethink and how do they unlearn behaviors that we were taught when we were young or early in our career. And so some of the questions that I get asked a lot about innovation is how do I tell if my organization's really innovative? Because what we have found is a lot of organizations aren't as innovative as they say they are. And so it really comes down to these buckets. And you can ask yourself this from a perspective of your team as you're analyzing, is your team either innovative or creative? And so these are questions that you can ask yourself or you can ask the team. Again, you'll have to take it so it's not looking from a company standpoint, but looking at your division, department, or whoever you're working with, but it's food for thought. And then if I had to summarize everything we just talked about into a small bucket, it's do I value being right or just feeling right? Doubts lead to curiosity. And that's the biggest one that I take out of this is that if I have doubt and I don't understand, it's okay for me to ask questions and be curious to learn. Be a scientist. Being a scientist does not mean that I am wrong. It just means that I'm thinking and taking more information in and pivoting, which gives me an open mind and asking those curious questions. And it's okay to revise your opinions once new evidence demands it. So I have a QR code for you guys to connect with me on LinkedIn. I do posts about emotional intelligence. That's kind of my space I like to talk about. I do videos once a week that brings out a concept or something that I experienced for the week and how it brings back to leadership. I like to share ideas and go back and forth. So if you're interested, you can connect. If you have other questions like, Katie, I didn't understand this concept, email me or call me. And I would love to talk about it. This is some of the pieces that I absolutely love. Like my passion is in leadership development and having conversations that maybe you might not have with everybody, but maybe we should start having. So I'm going to stop sharing. I'm going to ask you guys what's one thing you're taking away from today that you're going to apply based on this training today. And you're only going to have like 30 seconds. You're only going to be able to give me the headliner of what you're going to take away and apply. Because they say once you go through a training, if you actually don't apply any of these concepts in the next 30 days, you're never going to apply them. And so we really want to make sure, how are we going to start pivoting?
We're already connected on LinkedIn, Katie.
Woohoo, April!
I thought we were because
we are
in the in Mish business for a while.
We saw each other, I think, at a conference.
Yeah, it's been a long time though.
I've been with Best and Brightest probably for 8 years, so yes. But April, since you started talking,
Yes,
what are you going to take
will
away?
go. I am going to take away the ask questions. I am going to, since I work hybrid, I am going to print out those question maps and keep one here in the office and one at home and try
Awesome.
to really use those more.
It's going to feel awkward at first, but you'll
Yeah.
pick up your own style with it after a while.
Yep.
Awesome. All right, who wants to go next?
And I also want to print out those questions, not only for my team, but like asking customers questions too. Like April does the Best and Brightest program, so it instantly I go, how can we be better for April? But one of the things that I wrote down that I really, really want to do is, instead of making that decision and telling my team, I feel we should do this, opening up the floor, asking them what are their thoughts, and follow-up questions with what are the risks and do we need more data for the decision making, as opposed to right away giving what I feel. Because I do want to take that barrier away where they are comfortable coming up with ideas.
Love it. You're building psychological safety and trust. All right, Cheryl.
Okay, so I'm going to take your takeaways about asking a better question, right? So asking the questions up front so that you know kind of how to navigate through those situations. I have actually an interview. I'm interviewing somebody now, so I might do that.
All
What I
right.
have to say is, you know, during COVID, we all decided that everybody wants to be remote, and training people remotely is the pits, and not everybody can learn that way. So that's going to be a question. Like, how do you best learn? And do you think you can do this through Teams? Otherwise, you need to be here.
I think that's great. I almost want to ask, like, send an email out to all of us afterwards. Let us know how the interview went.
Yeah,
definitely. All right, our session is done. We are right on time. I know I flew past the last couple slides, but you guys are going to have the PDF. I'm giving it to Therese. Therese will send out that follow-up email. If you have anything or need anything, I will stay on, but thank you for being present, speaking up, and sharing your stories. Like, I appreciate the authentic stuff that you brought today. So kudos to you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hope you guys all have a great day.
You too.
Bye.
Thanks. Bye.